So Tarun, you're part of E2E computing.
Yes,
Could you
E2E Networks
let
Private Limited.
could you tell us a bit about what the idea is?
See, the idea is that almost all the Indian content today is like hosted in US. Like there are like something like 25,000 mobile and web startups in India, and all of them need to kind of like host in US as opposed to like being able to host in India today, because the prices in India are like almost 2.5x to 10x what it costs in US.
Yeah.
And the dichotomy is there that we pay like about 10x for the broadband because all our content is hosted in US, and content is hosted in US because it's cheaper to host over there.
It's a chicken and egg, very
So it's a
bad.
chicken and egg problem. So someone has to like start this virtuous cycle where content can be brought back to India, and consequently broadband becomes cheaper in India.
But who are the main content creators in India today in terms of large players?
See, amongst the large players, it's obviously the media companies who
Yeah.
produce a lot of news-related content, and amongst the smallest players, like there are like huge number of very small two-people websites.
I see.
Examples include like a lot of e-commerce sites, a lot of travel advice sites, sites like financial advice, where
see.
like people give stock tips. Like the list is like endless. Like it's only limited by the imagination, the
I
kind of
see.
people who create
I see.
content.
How many numbers in terms of numbers? How
In
many
terms of
websites there?
numbers, I believe like there are very easily something like 10 to 25,000 India-focused small sites who require like computing resources of like about like one fourth of a server to two or three servers.
I see.
And these are all the mid-segment players who really cannot afford to host in India,
Yeah.
because most of them are like unfunded. It's only the venture-funded companies or very large media companies who could have hosted in India till now,
Because costs are so high here.
because the cost is so high over here.
So, how successful have you all been in taking this mission forward?
We just started our operations on November 1st last year,
Okay.
and I think the response has been very good. Uh, at least everyone is very excited about that. Okay, they have a growth path back to India, and even though some of the people, due to whatever reasons, may not be moving immediately, but we still had
I
like
see.
a lot of response in terms of like people who have just said that, can you match the price in US? We
I
say
see.
yes, and they move to us.
I see. I guess the start is the biggest challenge in that sense.
Right, right. So we have now started to get a few marquee names in the online travel space and the online matrimony space.
I see.
And once we have like these few marquee names and we are able to drop these names to our clients,
Yeah.
then I think like moving people to India would be a lot faster, because we have already taken care of the major issue, which is cost.
And what are the other issues here in terms of reliability, in terms of power, in terms of hardware?
See, one is of course that data centers itself is a very new business in India.
Yeah.
So there are some teething troubles in terms of like the data centers themselves not being very proficient in terms of like having qualified and trained manpower. But other than that, apart from cost of power and a little bit less proficiency, you see that like things are already moving apace, and I
We
think
are getting there in that
we are
sense,
getting there.
we
Like
have to push it to
in
make it
the
faster.
last year, we India has added something like 150,000 square feet of data center space,
I see.
and it's like the recognition is there that data centers have to be in India.
I see.
Now, only thing is how do you bring the content back? So that is where E2E networks comes into the
I
picture,
see.
where we become a large aggregator, buying data center services in bulk
I see.
and being able to sell them to cheap for every single startup
I see.
out there, where we can actually match the prices of the US hosting providers or US data
I see.
centers.
Excuse my ignorance, but which major centers geographically are the data hosting places in India today? North India, South, or no?
I think Mumbai is
I
the
see.
biggest one right now. The reason for that is like almost all the international fiber is actually landing in Mumbai.
I see.
Apart from that, you see like Bangalore is growing up, Hyderabad due to control S is growing up, Ahmedabad is also in on the map, and Delhi obviously is second biggest after Mumbai.
I see. I see.
So
But isn't it a bit unfair that the full net space, which is really so global, is really so US centric in some senses of the term?
US and European centric, like US, UK, Germany, these are the three big places where almost all the data of the world is hosted. And like I would actually think that it's a good idea to host the content locally, due to the fact that there are laws like Patriot Act and DMCA in the US,
I
which
see.
really should not apply to Indian content.
I see.
So,
What got you interested in data hosting and things like that? It's quite an esoteric subject. It's not visible when you use the net to the average user.
uh, right. So I have been kind of like been involved in buying and selling of data center services for the past 10 years of my career.
I see.
And we have been like kind of like from the past 5 years been wanting to get into this space in India, but the time was simply not right. Like 2004 Nixie was just starting out, there was no local peering happening between the ISPs, and till very recently the data center space was simply not there in India. Like you didn't get tier 3 or tier 4 data center space for at any reasonable cost.
Tier 3
So
meaning?
tier 3 is basically where you have like n plus 1 redundancy except for having two sources of power grid. And tier 4 is really when you have a complete n plus 1 redundancy where you have access to two different power grids,
I see.
two different UPS plus generator lines down to the last server, which typically has like a redundant power supply. And each server is also redundant in itself with another server. So basically, like you are able to achieve like 99.99% reliability.
I see. So what do you see as the future, say 5 years, 10 years from now? Of course, it's difficult to predict.
So,
We've grown amazingly in some fields like mobile
see,
phone.
the kind of future I would like to see, I don't know whether that's going to happen or
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
I would surely work my best to kind of like make it happen. My part of obviously.
Yeah.
But what I would like to see is that everyone has gigabit internet access at their homes in every part of the country, down to the every last village,
It's
down
possible.
to every last house in every last
It's
village.
possible.
It
given
is
the
possible.
economics. Within the economics, within the
We are talking about a time frame of 5-10
Yeah.
years. I think like in 5-10 years, like we should have like fairly ubiquitous internet where you're saying that at least in the metros and say class B cities, you should have like internet like within a day or two of like applying for it,
I
and
see.
typical speed should be between like 100 Mbps to 1 Gbps.
amazing. Thanks so much and all the best in your dream.
Thank you.